Zarni Koohnyed Toohn was dancing at a Sydney pub with friends when he was asked to leave the dance floor because he was using a wheelchair, which he was told put himself and others at risk of getting hurt. Now he's speaking up about the need for disability inclusive spaces, and he joins us now. Zarni Koohnyed Toohn, welcome. So the reality is you really don't want to be here, but you feel it's important to speak up.
It is. I feel like a lot of these stories do get missed. And they usually get swept under the rug, and it's a lot easier just to forget about it because there's so much admin work that we already have to do on our end, so it's better just to get on with it, I feel. Sometimes it can feel like it's a bit hard to educate people, but I think that's the part that's missing. The awareness isn't there at all. So I feel like training is important and awareness training is important, but it's whether people are interested in taking on that training and finding funding for it, but sometimes it feels like I'm having to do the legwork and I don't have the time for that.
Okay, so take us through what happens.
So it was my mate's birthday. As most nights we go out, and most of the places in Sydney are not wheelchair accessible. So what we usually do is I walk up the stairs and my mates would carry the wheelchair up, and then so anyway, it was late, and we had dinner, then went out, kicked on later in the night, and we were told by security, we asked them, can we get the lift? And they said, there's no lift. We said, no worries, we'll walk up the stairs. We were up there for around 10 minutes, and then I saw the dance floor. I rolled myself towards the dance floor, and then a security guard came to me and then said, hey mate, so we're gonna have to ask you to move downstairs because you're not supposed to be on this level. You're a risk to yourself and to people on the dance floor. And I told them, what's the worst that can happen? I'm already in a wheelchair. And maybe a few years ago, I would have been a bit angry and would have, sparked up an argument. But I told him, like, I've been to so many venues before, like, most of them aren't accessible, but this is the way we usually do it. And I know my limits, like me walking up. So I have cerebral palsy and I can walk up the stairs. But it just so happened that that day it was raining, so I prefer to use the wheelchair when going out in the city. But during the day, I usually use the crutches. So anyway, we were trying to educate the security guard, saying like, look, it's fine. And security guard kept telling me, no, we're gonna have to move you down. That's the manager's call. So my mate got involved and said, look, this isn't right. My friend should be here. Like, there should be no issues. But things got a bit out of hand, and we kept telling the same story, and you can imagine if you're saying the same thing. I haven't even finished our first drink for 20 odd minutes. It gets a bit frustrating when you're telling the same story over and over again. And we talked to the manager and stuff like that, and he still was adamant that I was supposed to be downstairs and not with the crowd. And the crowd, I know my limits. If it's a busy dance floor, I'm not going to head on the dance floor. It's a risk for me, and then I know it's a risk for me. But there weren't that many people there, and I should be able to make that call by myself.
Yeah. And so what the incidents like this, what kind of impact does that have on people with disabilities? Like, how did you feel as you left the venue?
I felt like I was a problem, and it's more of, and after that incident, and especially this year, I've realized it's more of the problem of the environment that we're in. And there isn't enough funding or enough awareness that goes around to making these places accessible. Money gets thrown around everywhere, but it seems that whenever it comes to diversity and inclusion, you've got diversity at the top of the stairs and disability at the very bottom. And so the gap will just keep getting bigger as things get more expensive. And people with disabilities, like employment and all that is already hard enough. So going out, if they can afford to go out, that's great. But then we have to also think about if these things happen to us, it's just going to spoil our nights. So what's the point of going out? And so it's easier to stay home and just do nothing, I feel.
It just shouldn't be the case. And so was it a surprise for you that something like this would happen in Sydney in 2024?
No, it's 2024, and I think, Sydney prides itself on diversity. We keep saying these things, and I know it seems very superficial. I remember reading some of the some disability inclusion plans from 2021 to 2025. Since we're trying to build a positive environment, we haven't even built an environment that is accessible for people with all different types of disabilities. And I feel like I'm quite lucky because you can actually see my disability. But there are people out there who have things like autism or Down syndrome, or just invisible disabilities that people can't see. And people, when people hear the word disability, I feel like they always lump it together. So therefore, people don't want to look at the different aspects of disability and the diversity within it, which is a shame because we do bring a lot to the table. And when growing up in society like that, we're made to think that way. It's only if we join in society in meaningful ways through like creativity, through employment, through education, is when we can actually connect a lot more. And we need that collaboration, because I feel like, so with this whole incident, the reason I didn't want to take it through legal cases, firstly because I don't like the admin work, but it's also, I know there's not enough awareness, and it's better to educate people rather than to put them through the legal process, because everybody hates that part.
And so you've actually offered to be an educator at this venue, but they've declined that so far? Or
yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't given that option and would have let them do it themselves. But knowing that people don't want to go the extra mile, I offered to do that. And then I got an email response saying, we won't go ahead with the meeting, we'll take our own actions. And we want to make sure it's inclusive and comfortable for everyone, which is like, I think I've heard that so many times, and it just seems like such a push away. And that's one way of pushing it under the rug. But, you know, this story wouldn't have been able to come to light if it wasn't for my friend who shared it, who was helping me, who was doing the talking with me at the pub. He shared it on his on his event page. So he runs a bunch of events called No Sense, and we've grown up through high school together, and we really love our music, and it's amazing to see what he's doing, him and the boys are doing in that scene. But them sharing it through their social media, that's when ABC caught on, and I originally wasn't going to actually talk about the story at all, but it was the week of Day of Disability, International Day of People with Disabilities, and already I could see there was a lot less awareness going out there on social media than there was in the previous years. Because I feel like Hannah Diminy said in her, I think it was a press conference or something, in this big interview, saying that the bar is already so low for people with disabilities, it might as well be underground. And that's what it feels like sometimes. Like I had to tell the guy that I'm just there to dance, I'm just there to listen to music. It's such a human thing, it's not even a human right, it's just a normal thing. And the fact that we keep fighting for something that's the bare minimum almost seems embarrassing. And when people don't understand that, they might see us as, oh, why are you whinging and whatnot? And
it seems so counter to what we hear in the media. Like we seem to talk about all awareness growing and people being embraced and accessibility improving, but the reality is quite different.
I feel like when people talk about shed light on inspirational stories about people with disabilities, it's often missing the mark, where it's only inspirational because people have tried so hard to get to that place, when we should actually be looking at the environment that made them disabled in the first place. It's the environment that makes them disabled, not the person themselves. If they had a ramp to that pub or an elevator, it would have been accessible. I wouldn't have been disabled in that way.
And so education is
education is the key, and I feel like we might have missed the mark. I feel like in the 90s it might have been a good time to do it, and I feel like with social media now, things get just sent left, right, and center. So, but I mean, it means with disability we do have to push it a lot more, and you find disability in all types of diversity as well, and they're usually the ones that are the most disadvantaged. So if we can't get that right, then how are we supposed to find equality throughout all diversities?
Yeah. And so you'd love it. You'd love it if this venue actually did embrace you.
Honestly, I don't care what they do anymore. It's up to them.
Cool.
Like, you know.
Okay.
And I wasn't trying to penalize them, and I didn't want to shame them as well. It was just more of a case that the reason why I didn't want to put their name in the venue name in the first place and my name in the first place, because it is a universal experience. You find this in a lot of pubs and venues in the city where there is that prejudice, but if people actually went to go look at the policy, it doesn't exist. And if it did exist, it's discriminatory. It's against the Discrimination Act. And so, but you know, it's good that we're having stories like this out there for people to understand, for people to hear, because I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough, and it gets swept under the rug.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much for your time, Joe.
Zarni Koohnyed Toohn there.